From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up today on AgDay.
There's a lot of sacrifice before that for years that nobody knows about.
The realities of daily life on the farm, even as the snow flies. With steel and aluminum tariffs in place, how did the farm equipment industry fare in 2019? And a historic day is about to unfold in Washington as the U.S. and China prepare to sign the Phase 1 trade deal. But how much ag will China buy? Good morning, I'm Tricia Sloma. Clinton is on assignment. In just a few hours, the U.S. and China are scheduled to make the Phase 1 trade deal official by signing it. Not much is known about what is contained in the deal, but a few details are leaking out. The South China Morning Post quoting sources saying China has committed to making large-scale purchases of $200 billion of American goods as part of the Phase 1 trade deal. The purchase target for manufactured goods is around $75 billion, with China also committing to buy $50 billion worth of energy, $40 billion in agriculture, and $35 billion to $40 billion in services. And those figures are reportedly on an annual basis. Commodity traders have said they would be waiting to see what is contained in this deal. For the last few days, they've been trading on the news out of the latest USDA crop report. While the acting World Ag Outlook Board chair says the trade deal was not directly reflected in the crop report, he pointed to the sale of soybeans.
You could argue that increased prices that we've observed over the past few months reflects some market anticipation of that deal. So in that sense, the deal is having an effect on our supply and use balance sheet.
USDA's latest crop report raises soybean prices 15 cents a bushel to $9 at the midpoint. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer says the details of the deal will be made public later this morning before the signing ceremony in Washington. But what specifically could China be buying when it comes to U.S. ag? One industry analyst on China's ag commodities has put out estimates. JCI China says China's annual buys of soybeans could hit 45 million metric tons. Corn would come in at 8 million and wheat at 5 million. It's also estimating imports of sorghum and distillers' grains could also hit 8 million metric tons. And despite the trade war with China and the tariffs, China's exports rose last year. China customs data shows exports rose 0.5% for the year. The data also shows exports to the U.S. fell 12.5% compared with 2018. One Chinese official said exports to non-U.S. markets had more than replaced lost trade with the U.S. But China is importing a lot of pork. In fact, customs data also shows pork imports jumped a record 75% last year. China also imported 88.5 million tons of soybeans last year. That's just slightly higher than the previous year. But last month, inbound soybean shipments were 9.5 million tons, the highest level since May of 2018. Today's signing ceremony for the Phase 1 deal is scheduled to take place at 11:30 Eastern, and we'll bring it to you live on Twitter and Facebook. And look for details on the deal on agweb.com. We have a complete wrap-up tomorrow morning on AgDay. Trade talks are also continuing on another front with the European Union and Japan. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer held trilateral talks with the EU Trade Commissioner and the Japanese Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry. The EU Trade Commissioner will meet one-on-one with Lighthizer on Thursday. It's expected the two will talk about U.S. threats to impose retaliatory duties on $2.4 billion worth of French goods in a dispute over that country's new digital services tax. The White House is in the final stages of deciding if it will slap 100% tariffs on French wine and luxury goods. A new storm system is starting its track across the U.S., bringing with it snow and ice. Meteorologist Cindy Clausen joins us with an update.
Yeah, that's right, Trish. It's going to be another messy end of the weekend for a lot of the nation's midsection, but that storm still just off the west coast, making its way onto the Pacific Northwest today. Now, it will combine with some energy that's going to be forming in the Four Corners region as well, and by the end of the week, things are going to get quite messy once again across the eastern half of the country. Well, let's take a look at some more prettier pictures. When it's cold outside, there are still busy days in the barn. Derek Light of Illinois sharing the this picture with us. Now the family getting a couple of new goats for 4-H this year, and you can tell they are loving all those warm hugs. I wonder if one of them is named Olaf. Well, thanks for sharing those pictures with us. I'll have a lot more on your forecast coming up in just a few minutes. Tricia?
Something to watch out for right now. It's believed 13 horses in Wisconsin died after eating hay tainted with a toxic beetle. It happened at a ranch in Muston, Wisconsin. Officials say summer flooding left the hay from the fields at the ranch unstable, so the owners bought hay and alfalfa from farms in South Dakota and Wyoming. But the owners say the hay was contaminated with blister beetles, which can damage a horse's stomach and intestines. Another 100 horses on the ranch are now sick, and they've set up a GoFundMe page to help with expenses. There are no other reports of horse deaths elsewhere related to the tainted hay. Still ahead, China has hopes from ramping up ethanol in the country. Could they be buying more U.S. corn? Some analysis coming up. And later, sun and a little sand might sound great this time of year, but that's not the reality for many farmers, as you'll see in the country. The Association of Equipment Manufacturers say farm equipment sales were good overall for 2019. Total U.S. farm tractor sales for last year grew 3.6%. Self-propelled combines notched down less than 1%. It's a slightly better performance than most expected, despite a year with tariffs on steel and aluminum products.
And you just never know what's going to happen on the trade standpoint. You know, you look back over the year, we've dealt with weather, we've dealt with uncertainty in renewable fuels, we've dealt with trade issues around the world, we've had uncertainty around NAFTA, around trade with China. Just been uncertainty around the, across the board that's been really just driving the market and frankly kind of wearing us out as we try to look at what that market's going to look like. But looking forward to 2020, I'd like to say that that uncertainty is going to quill just a little bit. But we're also in an election year, so you never know what could happen next.
But what about the used equipment market? Machinery Pete shares his thoughts while out in the field looking for deals.
Well, what I've been seeing in the used farm equipment market in 2019 pretty much jives with that AM report. A lot of folks are surprised given all the challenges in the ag economy here in 2019. But I'd also agree with AM report's assessment of what's happening on the dealer lot. Used inventory levels much better than they were, particularly compared to 2013, 14, 15, first part of 16.
Machinery Pete also says two hot spots in the used equipment market continue to be the 1 to 3-year-old tractors and combines still under warranty, and 8 to 10-year-old equipment, any type, in good condition. Soybean futures headed higher on Tuesday as investors waited to see official details of the Phase 1 trade agreement with China. What could the market do today after the deal is signed? Here's an update from the CME.
Hi, this is Ted from Zaner Ag Hedge coming to you from the CME floor here on a Tuesday. We're going to talk about the grains markets and tomorrow, Wednesday, is a very big deal for grains markets because we are anticipating the signing of this Phase 1 trade deal with China, which includes a big purchase agreement to purchase American goods, upwards of 50 billion in American goods. Some talk of 20 billion here just in the first quarter. So we're all kind of on pins and needles. We've seen this deal get ripped up and thrown away in the 11th hour once before. So we are a little bit nervous that this doesn't happen, but if it does happen, we should have a little bit of a sigh of relief across the board. Wednesday is the big deal for row crops, and does this deal get signed? And the trade is very pessimistic about this trade deal. So even if it does get signed, we might not have this big raucous party. What we're really going to need to see are purchases. But I'm wondering if we get the deal signed, if we see some of those purchases come through really very quickly after that deal gets signed, then the market would start to really believe. So we'll have to keep a very close eye on that. Again, this is Ted Seifert from Zaner Ag Hedge coming to you from the CME floor.
It was hoped China would be a market for U.S. ethanol, but a recent announcement from China about ethanol could have a big impact on the U.S. market. Here's more in today's analysis with Tyne Morgan from the Farm Journal studios in Kansas City.
Here now with Aaron Fitzpatrick of Rabo AgriFinance. And Aaron, we recently heard from China that the ethanol mandate, the lofty goal of having E10 blends in China, probably isn't going to happen in 2020 like they originally stated. Do you think the market already knew that?
I think, they haven't been getting close to even reaching a 3% blend in the last few years. So, we also heard from some USDA reports last summer that they weren't expecting them to reach that level. So I don't think it was a huge surprise to the market. I do think that if you look at the amount of imports that China has been taking from the U.S. recently, which is zero, any type of import that they would have would be new demand in the global trade market. But are we going to go from their sub 3% to a 10% this year? No. And I don't think anybody was expecting that big of a jump.
But even if we see them push that off a few years, I mean, does China need to start ramping up imports, whether that be ethanol or whether that be of corn? I mean, do we need to see China start ramping it up to ultimately meet that goal?
Well, I think there's two things here. Whether or not they implement ethanol E10 blend, that's really a government policy decision in China. A lot of it is to do with pollution and their clean air policies. And then on the other hand, actual corn, a lot of that has to do with what's going on in their domestic corn production market and domestic feed demand market. So that really is going to be more driven by supply and price, whereas ethanol imports are going to be driven more by government policy.
But even if we do see that government policy come out, I mean, it's not just the U.S. that they'll be buying from, right? I mean, we have competitors in the area of ethanol.
Right. It'll be interesting to see if they do start importing in style, how much of it comes to the U.S. and how much of it potentially could go to Brazil.
Okay, so then what are you watching with ethanol? What do you want to see happen in 2020 to see some of that demand come back that we were maybe hoping for in 2019?
Yeah, so I mean, everybody's focused on the corn and the ethanol, but also on soybeans. What comes out of this meeting on Wednesday and the phase 1 signing, that's really going to drive what we should expect going forward.
All right, Erin, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We need to take a quick break, and then we'll have much more right here on Ag Day.
Precision Planting Winter Conference 2020. Sessions to help you maximize your farm. January 21st through the 24th. Visit bpwinterconference.com to register for this free event.
Meteorologist Cindy Clausen joins us now. Cindy, the upper Midwest seeing some action, and they're giving it again.
Yes, more today, and there's going to be even more later this week. So let's get right to it. It's going to be kind of like a 1-2 punch for especially the upper Midwest and into the upper parts of the Great Lakes, as we're going to see some snow today with a system that's going to be moving off to the east into the Great Lakes states. So the snow stays more in the northern parts of the Great Lakes. But we're going to be watching this system that's making its way into the Pacific Northwest. So rain and upper elevation snow for you there. That's going to move across the country, but watch what happens in parts of the Four Corners region. We're going to start to see a low developing there. That's going to pick up a little bit of moisture as well. So one low starts to move off towards the east coast. Still a little bit of lake enhancement there with some of that snow on the backside. A bit of a break for Thursday, but watch then what happens as we get into Thursday night and we see that low in the Four Corners region start to get into the plains. So we're going to start to see some messy weather, some snow, some ice, some rain, and all of that energy that's out in the west. All of this is going to eventually combine, making a pretty messy weekend again for a lot of the eastern part of the country. Now, the past 24 hours has been the southeast with the most precipitation. We've seen over an inch and even over 2 inches in spots. Add on the next 24 hours and you see more of that in the southeast because we've got a kind of front that's been straddling there. You can also see that additional moisture coming into the western part of the country with that system that's moving in today. Now, as far as snowfall, it's mostly been in the Pacific Northwest and those higher elevations, but watch what happens when you add the next 24 hours and we start to see some more additional snowfall, especially in the far northern tier of states, and then you start to see that additional moisture coming into the Four Corners region as well. Let's look at those temperatures. Very cold in the north central United States. Temperatures this afternoon still below zero in parts of North Dakota, maybe even South Dakota. Well, we're still dealing with 70s, even 81 in Brownsville, so a big difference from north to south. Into the overnight hours we go, and boy, is it going to feel cold as we see a low temperature around 17 below in Bismarck, but still very mild temperatures in the far southeast. But notice that cold air creeping a little bit further to the east. As we get into tomorrow, we're going to see those temperatures starting to cool down in western parts of the Great Lakes as well. And speaking of cooling down, this is the feels feels like temperature well below zero. In fact, it's feeling like 25 to 30 below in some of these upper Midwest and northern plains areas. And as we get into tomorrow morning, look at that again, 30 below is what it feels like in Bismarck. All right, here is the look at the jet stream. You can see that the west coast storm that's going to be moving across the area, and that's going to bring that stormy weather. And look what happens in the early part of next week. Some very cold air expected to come down into the northeastern part of the country. That's your national forecast. Now let's check on the weather where you live. Drain, Oregon, rain likely with snow later tonight and a high of 44 degrees. Selby, South Dakota, mostly sunny but frigid with temperatures falling from that high of -2. West Liberty, Kentucky, showers and maybe a thunderstorm with a high of 64.
Just look at all the damage caused by a small tornado in Loris, South Carolina. That's in the eastern part of the state. All these cars you see were in the parking lot of a high school at the time the storm hit. It's estimated winds from this tornado were as strong as 90 miles an hour, but damage was much worse at another school about an hour away in North Carolina, where part of the roof was ripped off, injuring 3 students. They're all expected to recover. Germany may take drastic steps to stop the spread of African swine fever. And later, now's the time for farmers to kick back and relax, right? Well, think again. See what's happening right now in Idaho. Germany is considering taking some drastic steps to fight African swine fever. Politico reports one of the steps involves building fences on both sides of the border with Poland. The disease appeared in wild boars in the western part of Poland, and that country has also been fighting the spread ever since. EU officials have said it's very possible the disease will spread across the border. Germany is home to 26 million hogs. Cases of classical swine fever have officials on the Japanese island of Okinawa concerned. Farm Journal's Pork says the highly contagious and deadly disease was confirmed after one farmer reported pig deaths due to an unknown respiratory ailment. The disease has since been discovered at 2 additional farms, affecting about 5,000 pigs. Japanese officials are investigating the origin of the outbreak. As of 2018, Okinawa had almost 226,000 pigs. This is the first time the island has had to deal with the disease in over 30 years. Do many farmers take a vacation to warmer places this time of year? One Idaho farmer has a reality check on what winter's like on his farm next in the country. It's the off season for many farmers right now. So what do they do? Jake Putman with the Idaho Farm Bureau has this reality check.
This is what most of America thinks farmers do in the off season, but nothing could be further from the truth.
Hats and gloves and ski masks.
Meet farmer Mitchell Searle from Burley. He spends the winter working sun up to sundown in freezing temperatures.
So some people think that farmers just go to Hawaii and go to the Caribbean during the winter. What's the reality behind that?
Well, I guess the rich ones probably do. But for any young farmer rancher, you gotta hustle. And someday when you're established, I guess that's your reward. But there's a lot of sacrifice before that for years that nobody knows about, you know.
So what are you working on here today?
So this is a wheel line driver for sprinkler irrigation. It's probably 30, 40, we have some that are 50 years old. And the main bull gear was worn out, and so we got that replaced. The other thing you do in the winter is manage these potato storages. So you've got to be in there inspecting them, making sure the temperature is right, and then when they come to get your potatoes, oftentimes you'll need to be here to help them. We run 36-inch spud rows, and we go through them in the winter, tear out the primaries, work on the rollers, put new clips, bearings. You know, you just go through. We've got a kind of a maintenance program that we do.
Then there are the countless improvement projects, off-season vacations, are still just a fantasy for Searle, but maybe one day.
If you're not going to be trying to get ahead doing the maintenance, but you got to do the maintenance sometime, so winter's the time to do it.
The winter season is the busy season for farmers like Searle. For the Voice of Idaho Agriculture, I'm Jake Putnam.
And we thank Idaho Farm Bureau for sharing that story. That's all the time we have for this morning. Clinton will be back tomorrow when we have special coverage of the signing of the Phase 1 trade deal with China. For all of us here at AgDay, I'm Tricia Sloma. Have a great day.